everybody, and welcome to our final session of the Electronics Life Cycle and Supply Chain Summit. If you know Walt Tobin, definitely you will know the Electronics Representative Association, ERA. If you don't know the ERA, well, something is missing, and you do need to stay throughout this particular session. Walter has been in this industry for quite a while, and I really consider it a great thrill and a pleasure for him to present about supply chain challenges in the field. What worked, what didn't work, how do you solve it, and what are the solutions that Walter can offer this industry. This is one of those sessions where you do need to stay by the phone with a notepad in hand and also get a link for the replay. My name is Bolaji Ojo, publisher and managing editor of the Ojo Yoshida Report. It's really a pleasure to have you join us for this particular session. Just a few housekeeping tips. If you have a question for Walter, please click on the Q&A button in the right-hand corner of your screen and type in your question into the window. We will try and answer your questions live. Anyone that we can't answer live, we will answer through the Q&A chat panel. Now, like I said, this is our final session, and I have with me Walter Tobin, CEO of the ERA, Electronics Representatives Association. Walter does not need that much of an introduction. I know many of the folks online right now, they know him. But it's not just that they know Walter. They want to hear what he's got to say. And I can tell you, I'm saying it, I'm eager to hear what he has to say about the experiences we've had in the last 3-4 years and some experiences that we can draw from the past. Walter, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Balaji. I am frankly thrilled and honored to be presenting on this session. So I really thank everybody, and hopefully we'll be able to shed some light on some of the issues that we've had in the past, and be able to, answer some questions moving forward. So I'm presently the CEO of Electronic Representatives Association. I've been in the industry a long time. My career up until the last 10 years has been in the channel, having spent 15 years with Arrow Electronics, 12 years with Pioneer Standard that was bought by Arrow in 2003, and then 9 years at Future Electronics as a corporate vice president, and the last 10 years been the CEO of ERA. I'm really pleased to honor. The questions that I want to sort of ask or answer is, we seem today to be buried in inventory, and, how did this happen? Who's to blame? Why didn't all of our supply chain management tools work? How do we get out of this mess? And who needs to do what? And any lessons that we've learned, and then maybe give a slight peek into the future. And I'm going to try to get all this done in a matter of 30 to 45 minutes. So it's a daunting task, but I'll give it my best shot. So how do we get here? Let me take you back a little bit to the 1980s, in which there was a movement in supply chain under the Deming philosophy to talk about total cost of ownership tools. And this will have an impact later on in the presentation. And total cost of ownership was really the tool that people were basing their procurement decisions on, based on not only the piece price, but on-time delivery, quality ratings, payment terms, freight terms, and all that was put into a formula. And procurement people were using that to decide who to give the award, who to make the award to, based on the TCOO, total cost of ownership, versus just the piece price. 86, then we pivoted to Six Sigma. That was all about improving operation efficiency. And then in the later 80s and 90s, we then Six Sigma then adopted the philosophy about lean, and lean began to talk about things like the Kanban system, 2-bin systems, proximity stock, just-in-time inventory. What we in distribution call the customer had just-in-case inventory. But really, it really began to morph into doing things with as little inventory as possible, and you didn't want the inventory to hit you until you absolutely just needed it, a minute before you needed it. And hence the term lean became into play in the electronics industry. In the 80s, we began outsourcing. Our customers, really through a lot of the advent of surface mount technology, they began to outsource their production from through-hole to surface mount to contract manufacturing. It started really here in North America, primarily in the Huntsville area. And EMS became, not only started to build, but then started to procure, buy, and did even direct customer fulfillment. EMS then quickly grew into a huge global industry, and a lot of the EMS companies began to move their production offshore. Outsourcing was the battle cry in the 80s, and if you were a CEO or CFO and were trying to hold on to continuing to buy and build in your local plant, you were probably replaced by a hue and cry coming from your shareholders that outsourcing is the way to go, and we want to be competitive, and therefore we need to outsource, certainly manufacturing and most everything that we can outsource. So this became a movement that inventory began to become a dirty word. And if you look at a balance sheet of any company, and going back to your freshman accounting, inventory is an asset. And, but it really became the hue and cry of Wall Street that inventory was more of a liability. We don't want precious working capital tied up in inventory. We want you to use precious working capital to buy companies, to buy technology. And so Wall Street began to really consider inventory as a liability, when in fact, as you know, on a balance sheet, it's very much an asset. When you look at, is it a liability or an asset? Certainly it's an asset. And if you were running a company, for lack of a nail, the war is lost. If the production line shuts down because you don't have inventory, you do anything to get the inventory. But in some cases, you may have bought the product from a manufacturer that provided you the lowest cost, the lowest PPV, because you were based on purchase price variance. And so you bought it to get your PPV incentive, and you ran out. So the line shuts down, and as you know, what did the low cost of what you bought it at have anything to do now when you shut the line down and there's no chips to be put in the chip shooter, and the manufacturing line stops? So, some of us in distribution, we would always say, make sure that when you're buying a product that the parts, the prices come with parts. Make sure that you're going to have continuity of supply. So inventory, the theme of this presentation is inventory is very much an asset, not a liability, even though Wall Street continues to bang that drum. We then had the world of procurement become so sophisticated and mature that the advent of sophisticated supply chain tools, the procurement teams, regardless of the size of your company, began to have access to real-time, worldwide global pricing. And therefore, the procurement teams and the companies began to evaluate their procurement teams based on meeting or beating the best price in the world, and based the incentive of the procurement teams on what we call purchase price variance, how much they were able to be at or below that global price based on the bill of materials. So the whole TCOO incentive went out the window. And even today, a lot of our procurement professionals really have their incentive based on PPV, purchase price variance, which is really meeting or beating that lowest price globally. So price became the battle cry, low price became the battle cry, and we'll talk about what effect that had on us as we found ourselves, in challenging the last couple of years. So the perfect storm that was created really was around those three areas. The fact that inventory became criticized by Wall Street. Inventory is a bad word. It's a dirty word. We don't want inventory on your books. Put the inventory on somebody else's books. Global pricing became the battle cry. We want you, regardless of the size of your company, to buy at the lowest global price. And we want to continue to outsource. So those three ships on the water were part of the perfect storm that we found ourselves in up until 3 or 4 years ago. Then the pandemic hit in 2020. And what did this really mean? It really caused all of us to sort of give pause. We've never experienced anything like this in our world, and it sort of shut the world down. But the pandemic hit in 2020. What happened? If those of us remember, it was only 4 years ago, if you remember, panic set in. We couldn't get ventilators. We couldn't get masks. I mean, remember those days? We were running around. There was panic buying. All the supply chain management tools that we had that we were looking at, frankly, were all disregarded. There was a buying frenzy. Those of us, the companies, a lot of companies, probably people on this call, were experiencing book-to-bills of more than 10 to 1. And it was a crazy time. And yet we couldn't travel. We couldn't see customers. We couldn't get in. Nobody was working. Everybody was working from home. You couldn't get in to see engineers. You couldn't get in to see buyers. And yet you'd ask people on the phone, how's business? And they would say, I'm having a record year. It was really counterintuitive, wasn't it? And it was a record year because it was Katie by the door. We were shipping everything. We were buying. We were shipping product. And we always asked ourselves, do we think this will last forever? Well, we were enjoying it while it lasted. And as we were waiting for the golden screw to come in, and we thought we'll just enjoy these times while they're here. 2022 and 23, guess what happened? Manufacturers began to put the brakes on the orders. They really didn't believe that this order rate could be sustained. They started doing what? They took unprecedented supply chain actions against the channel, against the end customers. They implemented non-cancelable, non-returnable orders to their OEM customers direct. Probably unprecedented. They implemented NCNR clauses to the channel. Probably unprecedented. Most of the distributors buy as a part of their franchise. They have return privileges. They have stock rotation, and they were enforced. They were being forced by the manufacturer to take NCNR clauses, or if you don't want to sign off the NCNR, we're not going to ship their product. Then the channel, the distributors starting enforcing NCNR clauses to their end customers. As customers were buying everything, we said, listen, we don't believe the demand. We're going to have you sign the NCNR. Customers would sign anything to be able to get the product. Then there was implemented price in effect at time of shipment. And that was something that was never really implemented in all my years in distribution. It was always price in effect at time of order. You bought the parts from the manufacturer. If the manufacturer raised the prices down the road, my orders that were already in the factory, their prices were kept whole. Once they went to price in effect at time of shipment, it forced the channel to begin raising prices to their end customers, which they've never really had to do. We had to raise the prices. So the orders that we were shipping back then in 2022, 2023, and early in 24 were really the demand for the last year. We were just advanced shipping. All the golden screws they were waiting for got shipped. And we then started saying, hey, hold on. The supply chain is really broken. I've got more inventory than I need. Can I cancel the order? No, they pulled out the NCNR clause. They wanted to return excess inventory. And it all sort of just ground to a halt, didn't it? Here we are today in 2024 as the year is coming to an end. We have excess inventory at all levels. OEMs are full of inventory. Contract manufacturers are full of inventory. The distributors are full of inventory. They're trying to burn it down. Wall Street, remember the Wall Street thing a couple of slides ago? Wall Street says, what are you doing? We don't like precious working capital tied up in inventory. You got to reduce the inventory, get the inventory down. If you're a publicly traded company, they were looking at inventory. They were looking at DSOs on your accounts receivable. Get the inventory down. Get the inventory down. Wall Street then put pressure on companies to reduce costs. There's been layoffs across the supply chain. factories slowed down. Factories went to 4-day work week, 3-day work week. Factories had layoffs. The manufacturers are going to be very slow to reopen whenever we come out of this. They're not going to believe the demand. And certainly the layoffs, unfortunately, we've had across the supply chain really have been unprecedented. The other dynamic that I've never heard about in all my years in this business was that we had customers stop paying their bills to voluntarily put themselves on credit hold so they weren't able to receive any future receipts. And that's something that was just astounding. My jaw sort of hit the floor when I heard that companies were voluntarily putting themselves on credit hold by stop paying bills to stop the flow of these NCN orders from coming in. So why didn't all the supply chain tools that we had in place work? Well, I'm suggesting maybe they did, but they were really ignored. And let me take a second on the next couple of slides to do an autopsy of what I say is the supply chain in the field and why some of those supply chain signals were either ignored or they really weren't correct. So if you look, this is a very simple slide at the perfect world of supply chain. If you have an OEM customer that has a forecast of production and they give a forecast, an order forecast into the component manufacturer in 12 weeks, the manufacturer says, hey, my lead time is 12 weeks. Well, that's all pretty good. That really works great, right? I need them in 12 weeks, you ship them in 12 weeks, everything works great. So that's a perfect world. The world that we live in really isn't perfect, as we know. How accurate is, first of all, the forecast coming from the customer? Well, I maintain that any company that gives a forecast on what they need to buy, that forecast probably starts off in the sales department of that particular company. They go to the sales department, how many computers, how many x-ray machines, how many things are you going to be able to sell this quarter, this year, this half? And they get a forecast of sales. That goes into the manufacturing operation. How many can you build? That goes into the purchasing department. How many we're going to be able to produce? And everybody may add a little windage to that amount. But it all starts with the perhaps inaccurate forecast coming from the sales team. So those of us on the call that are from the sales world, it's really our fault that the whole supply chain broke. And I'm being a little facetious, but really not much. Then we look at the lead time from the manufacturers. How often are the lead times updated? How accurate are they? If I'm a manufacturer and I have lead time that's 8 weeks, and my lead time suddenly goes to 14 weeks, am I going to announce that and post that on my website, announcing to the world my lead time has gone from 8 to 14 weeks, knowing that my competition may see that and say, hey, we just saw my competition go to 14 weeks. I'm still at 6 weeks lead time. They'll try to go get my customers and bring them over to their manufacturer, their company, because their lead time is still within is lower than what mine has gone out to. So I think this is really where the disconnect begins. And yet, with all the transmissions of signals going back and forth between the OEMs and the component manufacturer, with APIs that we all feel good about it, I maintain that all we've done over the last couple of years is transmitting bad information faster. So I think that we all feel good about it, but it's bad information faster. So what happens is, in the real world, is we have an OEM customer that some salesperson decides that I'm going to short sheet the lead time to get an order, and I know it's going to be 12 weeks to get that particular product to the customer. I'm going to short sheet it so I can get it to you in 6 weeks. So they bring an order into the manufacturer. I need the product in 6 weeks. They go to the component supplier and they say, hey, listen, I told you it's going to take me 12 weeks to build those. Well, what do I do? How do I get production? How do I get my product in 6 weeks versus 12 weeks? Enter the world of distribution. The distributors really have functioned as a sort of a relief valve in that they provide the distribution's role has always been to satisfy unforecasted demand inside a manufacturer's lead time, period, the end. If every customer knew what they wanted and every manufacturer knew what the accurate lead time, there would be no need for the world of electronic component distribution. But it's morphed into 100 billion, that's B like in billion-dollar industry worldwide, because of the challenges that we have in getting an accurate forecast from the customer, marry that to an accurate lead time from the manufacturer. This is where the distributor has come in and played a really excellent role. And when a lot of the criticism came when the pandemic hit, why didn't the distributors have the inventory? Isn't that what distribution is supposed to have? How come they don't have the inventory? Can you imagine it being a distributor getting 50,000 forecasts from customers that are all plus or minus 20% wrong, and trying to feed those into a manufacturer and have the supply chain correct? It's a challenge that the distributors have had. We talked about EMS in the advent of outsourcing. The contract manufacturing with almost all distributors, all manufacturers, probably now represents well over 50% of the revenue of any company in our industry. So EMS has come in and disintermediated between the customer and the distributor, and the customer, distributor, and the component supplier. So EMS has come in and they aggregate the demand from all the people they're building for and give that forecast. It could be plus or minus 20% wrong into the distributor, and the distributor to the manufacturer. The messy financial world that we find ourselves in the supply chain is this slide. If you look at the ability of the supply chain to be self-funding, there's the struggle. If you look at the average gross profit of a particular OEM customer, I'm not going to mention any names, but all the customers that we sell to, the OEMs, I just pick an average gross profit of 45 points. They may be 30, it may be 50, but they're making a very high level of gross profit as an OEM manufacturer of original equipment manufacturer. If you look at the other end of the supply chain, up the supply chain, and look at some of our component manufacturers, they run anywhere from 30 to 65% gross profit. If you're in the semiconductor space, you might run as high as 70%, take out R&D of 20 to 30 points, but you're still probably averaging around 45 points. So the two people on the end of the supply chain are doing pretty well financially. If you look at the contract manufacturers, I just took the financials of two publicly traded contract manufacturers. The gross profit that these two companies make, one makes 7.3% gross profit, one makes 9.2% gross profit. Not a lot, is it? When all that they do design, they do manufacturing, they do shipment, they do direct customer fulfillment, they do repairs, they do depot repairs. They do a great job. That's all they're making is between 7 and 9 points of these two EMS that I picked. If you then go upstream in the supply chain and look at distribution, if you look at distribution, and I just took two publicly traded distributors in the component side, they're making between 11 and 12 points of gross profit. So the organizations that are doing all the work in the supply chain, when in fact the pandemic hit, why wasn't there inventory? The people in the middle are making the least amount in the financial model of the supply chain. So when the pandemic hit, what could possibly have gone wrong? What could possibly have gone wrong? So when I was a little boy, there was a saying that I was taught, pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. My question to the audience is, who's getting fat and who's getting slaughtered? The people in the middle are getting slaughtered. And that's why the supply chain that we have today in the field, hand-to-hand combat, this can't be sustained any longer, because it'll only get worse as the OEM customer continues to put pressure on EMS for these quarterly cost takedowns. I want 5% cost takedowns every quarter. When did that ever happen? Why is that something that's required? That then flies into the world of distribution. The EMS requires lower margin from the distributor. If you look at the other end, when you look at the margins that the component manufacturers allowing the channel to make, they continue to fall. We've got two major manufacturers in our industry today that are requiring distribution to take sub 5 point gross profit. So where is it going to end? Everybody wants the inventory. Everybody needs the inventory to build something, but nobody wants it on their balance sheet. And if we expect the distribution industry or our industry to manage this asset, this financial model is not sustained much longer. A brief note, I'm probably stating the obvious here, but what is the role of the franchise distributors or distribution? Distributors have two things to sell. I have inventory and I have accounts receivable. I have a line of credit. So we have product and all that, but really the distributors are really, as I say on the slide, distribution is really selling confidence. If you look at any distributor's balance sheet, well over 90% of the distributor's balance sheet of their current assets are tied up in inventory and accounts receivable. If the distributor sells the inventory, doesn't collect the money, cash flow. If they don't buy too much inventory, don't sell it, cash flow. So this is really the conundrum that the world of distribution faces, and having to manage this all the time and to support the customers with supply chain programs, security of supply with franchise product. What they really out there selling, as I say, is confidence. I just came back from Electronica in Germany. I don't know if you went. These are my two takeaways, or also known as the surprises I left Germany with. My first takeaway was the rebranding of what we used to call the broker channel to the independent distributors. You know, in the old days, a broker was kind of a dirty word. You couldn't find the inventory at one of the franchise sources. You went to a broker. They had inventory. You really didn't know where the inventory was coming from. You sort of bought it, buyer beware. And the independent distributors have rebranded themselves to be called, the brokers have rebranded themselves to be called independent distributors. The stunning takeaway for me was some of the biggest and most expensive stands, booths over there are called stands, with the independent distributors. These stands were well over $1 million in cost. And I'm wondering, we haven't shipped anything in a year and a half. We've been swimming in inventory. Where do these independent companies get the financial wherewithal to build these stands and the financial? Why were they at Electronica? I'll answer that question in a second. So if you look at the independent channel, and I refer to them as independents now, I don't want to be disrespectful. They had, according to electronic sourcing that just came out during the show, they generated about $14 billion in revenue in 2023. My question is, where did they get the inventory? Where did they find the inventory to sell this inventory? Well, I'm assuming they bought it from companies that were selling the inventory, that wanted to get it off their books because Wall Street was telling them to get the inventory off the books. So they were buying inventory from OEMs, perhaps from EMS, perhaps from the channel, buying inventory, and were reselling it worldwide. And they generated $14 billion in revenue in 2023. Probably revenue that some of us would have liked to have a piece of, frankly. The revenue came out of the franchise distribution point of sale. There were no credit to the franchise distributor branches. There was no compensation to manufacturers' reps if that manufacturer used the manufacturer rep model. So if the branches and the reps continue to lose revenue, lose funding, who's going to do the design work? Who's going to do the design work between the rep and the distributor to go design in new opportunities for that manufacturer? The other thing is this excess inventory is aging. You know, if we've been in this now since 2022, it's now 2 years old. And I don't know what the DACO requirements are from some of our companies, if it's, 12 months, 24 months, but this inventory is getting old. And if it's not stored in the right climate controlled warehouses, it could become damaged if it's not really stored properly. Wherever the inventory is going, they have to make sure that the warehousing, the logistics provides for the right temperature to store this very highly complex inventory. The independent channels obviously buying inventory at below OEM cost, below distributor cost. They have global sourcing operations. They're buying it. I know in walking the floor of Electronica, I probably had no less than 20 independent distributors come up to me. I'm walking around with my suit on and a clipboard, wanting to know if I wanted to sell my inventory to them. All wanted to buy my inventory. So I think that a lot of them are over there to continue to aggregate global inventory, to buy it, to be positioned whenever the market turns. But as you know, if you're not buying the inventory if you don't have a franchise relationship with the manufacturer, you cannot provide pass-through warranty protection. You're not protected against patent infringement from the supplier. You have no real traceability. There's probably no return privileges. And the danger of counterfeit product entering the supply chain is real. And we'll talk about that in a second. But with all the aggregation of supply chain and inventory that was being done the last 12 to 18 months, my question is, will the independent channel see the turnaround of the market before us, or in fact, have they already begun to see it? Because they have the inventory and they're offering low prices to those buyers that are being measured and lured by their PPV incentive. This is a screenshot of an unnamed independent distributor. I put it on here. Some of these certifications, I don't know what they mean. Some of them I'm familiar with, but I'm thinking, if you can't hide it, feature it. I don't know why they would need so many certifications. I know in going to some of the independent distributors, they all touted their ability to catch counterfeit product. They all touted their ability for software through non-destructive testing. They don't have to decap the components to find out if it's not a franchise product. And I'm not a double E. Maybe they're correct in their software and tools, but to me, if you're a franchise distributor, you really don't need any of these certifications other than the fact I'm only buying from from suppliers that I have a franchise and authorized relationship with. So my question is, who's going to be the canary in the coal mine? Will it be the franchise distributors, or will it be, in fact, the independents? I don't know. Maybe the independents have already seen it. Maybe that's where they were able to afford these, hundreds of thousands of dollars, $1 million booths in Germany because they've been, frankly, maybe have seen it the last year. I don't know. The second takeaway that I left Germany with was EMS offering procurement services. EMS, as you know, does buying, does manufacturing, does direct customer fulfillment, does maybe returns, does depot repairs. This happened to be a large EMS that was introducing their procurement services. I took this right off their website. I X'd out the name of the EMS, but this is what they were touting in Germany, offering let us do your procurement, your purchasing for you. We will streamline your supply chain. We will have access. We'll give you access to our global buying power. We'll deliver cost-efficient, aka low prices, solutions. You'll be able to buy your product based on the purchasing power we have, which means they're probably buying at the OEM price that they're using for their other end customers. Contact us today. How we can elevate your procurement organization and transform your operations, aka provide you with lower piece prices. The box in blue is mine. EMS certainly can't provide. They're not a franchise distributor. They can't provide pass-through warranty, protection from indemnification of patent infringement, returns or stock rotation. Most of them don't give extended or discounted payment terms. And this procurement service looks an awful lot like them becoming a distributor. And that's a slippery slope. If in fact, then they're buying from even if they're buying from the manufacturer direct, for them to resell it to another company, the franchise chain breaks. And the companies that are buying it from EMS, they're not a distributor, would not be afforded the protection as if they bought it from a franchise distributor. So the tipping point that we are in our industry is very critical. I maintain today that right now, I think the world of franchise distribution has a little bit of an edge. But on the horizon is looming this EMS procurement services operation, and certainly the world of the independents. They are not to be ignored. They're not to be disregarded. They are powerful. They have global sourcing operations, and they are really touting the fact that they will keep counterfeit or bad inventory out of the supply chain through all these different software tools they have. This is a real tipping point that we have in our industry today. If in fact it tips in the favor of EMS procurement and independence, what does that mean to the world of franchise distribution that are have branches and hold branch training and work with the manufacturers reps and do demand creation, do design? And if in fact our procurement professionals throughout the world ignore that, how can that model be sustained in the world of franchise distribution? So it's a real critical time in our industry, not to be taken lightly. Not in Germany, but, and again, not to get political with this slide, but looming on the horizon in the next 3-4 weeks are going to be global tariff war. And what will be the effect of the tariffs on global supply chain? Well, it's certainly not going to be good. I can't tell you specifically what it's going to mean by product family or by market segment, but if we start embargoing or tariffing Mexico, China, and Canada, they're huge supply chain sources for all of us. American companies are building a lot of product in Mexico. I was just down at Guadalajara about a month ago. Guadalajara, as you know, Mexico is one of the largest electronic manufacturing centers in North America. A lot of American companies are building product there. They're going to import it back into the U.S. If that product becomes part of a tariff, that will only increase prices to the OEMs that are buying it or to the consumer. So this will perhaps increase the demand on PPV if, in fact, independent distributors have moved the inventory already into the shores of the USA, and maybe they have an advantage because the inventory, if it's coming in from other parts of the world, will be tariffed. So we need to watch this very closely. The tariffs can only cause chaos in our supply chain. And I think just when all of us were ending to 2024, hoping for some relief in 2025, this can only increase the fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the supply chain. So the threats we have, here are procurement executives in the middle, trying to manage the world of global procurement. Do I go to the independent channel because I might get low prices? I might be able to hit my PPV. I may be able to maximize my incentive. I'm being forced to, being measured on meeting and beating the standard on the bill of materials. Do I want to go to EMS and have them do my buying for me? I think the EMS is certainly using this as a Trojan horse. Once I start doing the buying for the OEM, the next step was why don't you let me do your manufacturing for you? But I think that until that, if they're doing procurement for you and you're getting lower prices from them, you risk the break in the franchise chain, in that you lose protection and you lose quality and all of that. So I think there needs to be some real concern and a keen eye placed on that. Or do you continue to go to the franchise channel and try to be assured of security of supply and highly franchised product, lead time, supply chain programs that they have? And then the red box is certainly the impact, the threat of the tariffs. And frankly, it's for me, it's really unknown as to what effect it's going to have. So the action plan. What do we do? And this may be in my own naivete. We need to shift the emphasis in our procurement professionals to go back to looking at TCOO, total cost of ownership, versus price. It's a big difference. There's a big school of thought. Dust off the TCOO tools, dust off the Deming philosophy. It's real. It's more applicable today than it's ever been. And that we can't continue this downward spiral on measuring the award of procurement orders based on just price, because it's gotten us into the position that we're in. We need to procurement decision should be based on two things: the quality of the product and the on-time delivery. Supply chain. I need to have, I can never run out. I don't want to buy too much, but I need to have high quality from franchise sources. I think we need to let the supply chain partners, whoever is to the right or left of us in the supply chain, let them make a few more pennies of profit. Will you please? If you look at the OEM continuing to demand cost takedowns from EMS every quarter, that has to stop. There's no money left in the supply chain. You can't get blood out of a stone, and it's only exacerbating the financial ability of the EMS and the distributor to have inventory in the channel. It's exacerbating it. So that has to stop. OEMs need to allow EMS to make a few pennies more. To do all the work that EMS does to make 7 to 9 points of profit is crazy. When you look at EMS needs to allow the distributors to make a few pennies more profit rather than these single digit, high single digit, low double digit margins that distribution is forced to take, which will again exacerbate their ability to fund inventory. On the other end, we need to have the manufacturers look at how much profit they're allowing the channel to make. We've continued to see the margin continue to be taken down when it's now between 12 and 15 points of gross profit. The supply chain can't be sustained. When you have the pressure from the two ends in the middle, the two people in the middle, they're running out of gas, frankly, financially. We need to raise the banner to Wall Street that inventory is not a liability, it's an asset. And at some point, somebody has to have the inventory. We also need the continued focus on franchise distribution. The world of whatever happens with the tariffs, if the inventory gets short, God forbid if you get a counterfeit part in your end product, it will certainly cause you a customer. It could cost you your company's reputation if you're caught populating your boards with product coming from non-franchise distributors. There's a big danger there. And the last point is partnership. We all talk about partnership. You've seen the slide with the two hands shaking. A lot of it is just a relationship. Partnership comes when one of the two people is in trouble and needs help. If you don't help them, then it was nothing. There was no partnership. It was just a business relationship. So if you're not willing to learn, no one can help you. If you're determined to learn, no one can stop you. And you've all seen this slide from Winston Churchill, and I'm not going to read it, but if we do not learn from our past, is this a peek into the future of electronic components supply chain? These two organizations have been hiring a lot of people from where? From the world of electronic component manufacturing, electronic component distribution, electronic component supply chain. I wonder what they're working on.
Was a fantastic presentation. You've just taken us on a 40-year ride. I mean, you've. I'm not even sure where to start asking you all these questions because there's quite probably about 40 of them that I can think of right away. Let's take the issue of the EMS that you talked about. The history of the EMS companies is one of the reasons why the margin in that business is so small. Many of them were spun off from OEMs. Okay, so they were compressed into taking these tiny margins, and now we have a problem that dates back decades. The problem of franchise distributors versus the independent distributors. I mean, first time I'm hearing that I know they've been calling themselves independent distributors, but the word broker used to be kind of like a dirty word. But as one of our old friends who knows this industry quite well has just asked this question, well, there are franchise distributors that are selling components to the independent channels. How do you deal with all of that?
Well, I think certainly the independents are getting their material from some places, and some of them have franchise, some of them have direct franchise relationships. some of them have, we get a lot of these companies that want to join ERA or ECIA, and we look and say, you've got to have any line that you list on your website, you have to be franchised for. So some of them do have franchise relationships, and so they're getting product from the manufacturers. Some of them are buying it from distributors that want to get the inventory off their books, because Wall Street is saying your inventory turns went to 9 and needs to go back up to 13. So some of them, we're our own worst enemy, Balaji. We don't learn, and so we're trying to move the hot potato around, when in fact the issue is that everybody has too much inventory. I think that the danger is if the genie gets let out of the bottle, if people value something, they're willing to pay a few pennies for it. If they no longer value quality, on-time delivery, and I've got Balaji coming in to see me every Thursday talking about supply chain and my supply chain program, if they expect all that is free or that's a given, it costs companies real money to be on-time delivery and quality and all this other stuff. The distributor channel is running out of gas financially, and so how long can this be sustained? I know there was, as I said, there was big criticism of the channel. Why don't you have the inventory? That's what your distributors are for. They get 50,000 bad forecasts, and they're supposed to make magic out of it and have the inventory when everybody forecasted wrong. So I certainly don't have an answer. It's just that financially it has to stop, because it's going to get to the point, if all people want is low price, they don't want any services. That last slide to me scares me to death.
What also scares me is this concept that the entire supply chain at times runs on fuel. And the harsh reality for us is that somehow it still continues to work. And one of the reasons why it continues to work is because there are some companies in this system that are like the punching bags for everybody else. And you've just identified two of them, the distributors and the contract manufacturers. The problem is they don't have the leverage that they can use to kind of reverse that position. I recall one long-time industry executive telling me that all of these NCNR contracts, they're not worth the papers the papers they were written on. Walter, that was in 2001. This is more than 20 years later. How are you going to reverse these loss of power, or the power that distributors and contract manufacturers never really had?
Right. So the EM. So again, listen. EMS is a big customer segment for all of us. The OEM will continue to go to the EMS and say, "Listen, I know you're building this product for me. You've always been on time. We've had no problems, but I'm going to put it out for quote, and I'm EMS A, but I've got a quote from EMS B, and if you don't match the low price, you're going to lose the business." Or if I'm a distributor, I've been supporting EMS, and I've got the contract. I've never been late, always on time, good supply chain. Well, you've got to lower the margin because another distributor is undercut you. It's crazy. We're our own worst enemy because we keep lowering the margin because somebody's playing us against each other. And at some point, it broke. It broke in 2021, 22 when there was no inventory left in the channel. And it's going to continue to break because there's no money left. There's no money left to fund those two areas in the middle. And it's only going to get worse if, in fact, those two big guys on my last slide, we've always talked about one of them getting into the world of electronic components. And we've always said, no, they're not interested in doing it. I don't know. I'm frankly scared to death.
Do you remember Aaron?
Who?
I think the company was named Aaron. Aaron out of Texas. Anyway, let's leave that. You mentioned the whole issue of Google and Amazon getting into procurement. Okay, this is one of the concerns that one of our listeners is asking about. That how do you feel about the electronics components marketplace? The e-commerce website. I think there's a little variation in it, but it's somewhat similar, aren't they?
Well, I think that what's kept them out of that business was most of our customers don't go into Amazon like I do and want to buy something and buy one or two, and then they want supply chain. They want to be able to download a bill of materials. They want have do supply chain, have orders shipped every month. And frankly, today, one of them really doesn't do that. They could get into it overnight. I mean, I don't want to talk about a specific company, but they're all very sophisticated, multi-billion-dollar companies. They could get into this industry tomorrow and be able to take scheduled orders and be able to provide low prices. And who knows where the inventory is coming from? They could sign franchises. If I'm one of these two companies, I go to a manufacturer, says I'm gonna buy a gazillion dollars worth of product and I'm gonna put it on my website. Would a manufacturer turn them down? I don't know, but they're the big gorillas in the room that can't be ignored, especially if we're beginning to throw caution to the wind about the value of franchise product. That's the slippery slope.
Walter, you've identified so many issues and so many challenges within this market. I think what's scary for me are some of the conclusions that you came to. One, which is that we cannot continue this way. Two, I am wondering who is going to enforce some of the changes that we need to make in this market. It doesn't seem to me that there are those opportunities for doing that. And my last takeaway is that let me make it a question and then we can wrap up, which is, are we destined to going through this cycle of, it's not about the cyclicality of the market, but the cyclicality of these, shortages, inventory overload, and the pains that it inflicts on certain segments of the industry at the expense of others. Is that the destination? Is that the destiny, rather?
No question about it. The buyer's market will come back. When inventory gets when the market turns, what's going to happen when the buyers start buying? They're going to be looking for low prices because they know everybody's swimming in inventory up to here. They're going to look for low prices, and I think it's going to exacerbate the margin problem that's in the middle, and it's frankly. It all goes back to that area of PPV, the way procurement people are measured, and in my history, buyers lose their jobs for two reasons: they buy too much, and they bought the next price break to get the PPV, so they have an extra 5,000 pieces that sits in the warehouse of their company, and the CFO says, "Why did you buy the 5,000 pieces? It's sitting on my P&L. I got 3 years worth of supply." They fire the buyer. Or they buy too little because they bought it at a low price and they shut the line down. The line gets shut down and all of a sudden they come to me, "Hey, Tobin, where are the capacitors?" Hey, listen, I did my job. I bought at the lowest price. I hit the PPV, not my deal. You're fired because the line is shut down and everybody's sitting on their hands. Until that changes in some reversal back to basing things more than just on piece price, I think we're in for some tough sledding, Balaji.
Walter Tobin, CEO of the Electronics Representative Association. It's a pleasure always, Walter. I think we will have you back. I hope you will agree. I hope you will agree. Because the issues that you discussed, they're so critical to this industry. And you're talking about it at a time when we've just gone through another so-called once-in-a-lifetime problem. Right. And I've experienced at least two of them. Maybe I'm a cat, I have 9 lives, but it's always a pleasure having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Balaji. Thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Okay. Take care. This is the last session of the Electronics Life Cycle Supply Chain Summit. We're going to be having the 2025 event, and if Walter would agree, we will definitely have him back. But most likely we'll have him on the Odeo Shida report before then. It's really been a pleasure, Walter, and happy holidays to you and your family.
Thank you. Happy holidays, Balaji. God bless you. Thank you.